LACMA this fall is embarking on a Calder retrospective, so this talk is very timely. Hello Girls, as our water feature is known, as a result of doing the catalog, we learned that it had a different name that somehow got lost in time. So even though, let's see, where is this? Okay. So even though today I'll refer to this feature as Hello Girls, eventually when you visit LACMA, these names will be reversed and it will become known as the three Quintains. This is an aerial view of LACMA. These are the original three buildings built in 1965, and let me orient you a little bit. This is west to the ocean. These are the original three buildings. This is Amundsen, Hammer, Bing, and all of this was surrounded by water, and we're known for having the La Brea tar pits right here. And today, all this parking lot is all gone, this street is gone, and we extend this way with new buildings. In the early 1960s, the decision was made to build a new museum to display the art collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Natural History. So we're born of a natural history collection that's by USC. So a new museum was built on Wilshire Boulevard called the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and it's commonly referred to as LACMA. And these are the original three buildings. The architect was William Pereira. So below and surrounding the buildings was this pond of water, and the tar pits surrounding it, which go, actually, the tar pits, although you'll see a picture later, the large lake is here. There are eruptions that occur all over here to this day, and there used to be a lot of oil rigs and so on and so forth. And the tar would also erupt into the water. The Calder that I'm going to talk about is actually originally sited right here, between the Bing and the Hammer buildings. So LACMA commissioned Alexander Calder to create a work of art, and the site was chosen, which was that corner site. And the sculpture was made from stainless steel and painted. What we don't know about the original water feature actually is how the mechanics of water circulated. We've heard a lot about water here today. In this stage of the Calder, we don't know much about how water was circulated or filtered or moved or anything else like that, but we know that there was plenty of tar floating around in it, not duct material, but tar. So this is Calder's sketch for Hello Girls. And this was sponsored by LACMA's first art council. And at this time, you can see in the feature that there are essentially, there are three pylons, and he's got them spec'd, and this is actually a jet that he's going to shoot in here. And the idea is to create a wind and water activated mobile that sits in the notch. So this is, one building is right here, and there's another building right here, and you'll see that this represents a walkway that goes through the feature. And this is a sketch of the model Calder would build to present to LACMA's director of the time. So you have, these are pylons with branches and leaves or paddles, and he has marked them. This is R is for red, W is for white, white, red, yellow, white, etc. And he's also given an indication of relative heights, 10 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot. And so Calder transformed the sketch into a model. And I'll show you a color photo in a minute, and this is actually him playing with the model on a table. This is the model, which we still have. It lives in Objects Conservation. And you'll see that, in fact, the entire thing is all painted. And it's literally this big. Okay. And this is Calder meeting with LACMA senior staff, presenting the model, and the model is right here on the table. And here is the painted model. And these pieces do rotate. It's just a tiny pointed pivot. They rotate around, and they can come off, although they rarely do. So when the model was accepted, Calder actually had the feature built, but unlike the model, the paddles were the only areas that are painted. If we go back for a minute, so here are painted paddles. In the installation, you'll see that none of these branches get painted, none of the pylons get painted, and this is supposed to represent water. And the difference, of course, between the model and the installation is that you're supposed to walk between the elements. And something that didn't transfer from the model that's present in the file notes, because a lot of reconstructing this history comes from the files themselves, is that Calder had envisioned anodizing the non-paddle elements. That never happened, and I don't know why. And the early photographs, of course, are black and white, and this is Hammer. And you can see the walkway that goes through. This is actually starting at the museum itself and walking out through the Calder. So you've got one pylon on one side and two on the other. And the feature by LA County codes is technically referred to as a non-interactive water feature because it's too shallow to be considered an interactive water feature. And this site we know of exists, at least from the files, from 1965 to 1968. And you can see again, it's just a different view. Jets are intended to be hitting the paddles and spinning them around. And tar, in theory, in the records is said to have been coming up here. And then there are look downs from the building, and that's the pathway out into the park, pointing directly towards the tar pits. And this is the earliest color photo that I can find, where the jets are hitting the yellow paddles. So this first phase, actually, where you've got the Calder installed, Hello Girls installed between these two buildings, the stainless steel paddles were actually too heavy, and there's documentation that the branches started to sag. And the paint that was used on them was the self-same paint that was used on the model, which was Japan colors, and that was disintegrating. And so we still have touch-up paint for that, but it was that began the search to find better paints for use on these pylons and paddles in a water-sprayed environment. And we also have hard water, so the hard water to this day still leaves deposits on the paddles and pylons, which is very difficult to remove. In 1968, the feature is moved to the southeast corner of LACMA, so actually we'll go back in for a second, since we have a minute. So we're here from 1965 to 1968, then we move to here. Okay. Now, when we move to this corner, for some reason, the walkway disappears, and I don't know why. And also, you'll see that in this photo that there are no jets. However, the tar problem remained, but it's, as far as I can tell, it remains in this site, which is basically on Wilshire Boulevard facing west. This is the May Company building, which Blackma owns to this day. Okay. So in 1983, Hello Girls was requested for loan to Art Center in Pasadena. So Calder, the Hello Girls, as well as many other sculptures, go off to Art Center in Pasadena. And for many of those people who don't know what it is, it's a school that's above the Rose Bowl, well above. It's on a big bluff overlooking it. And here you have Hello Girls at Art Center in Pasadena. And these are the individual elements, and they're on concrete blocks. Art Center is on this high bluff, and you all know we have earthquakes, but we also have a thing called Santa Ana winds, which are very high winds that are capable of ripping palm trees in half and wreaking all kinds of havoc in Los Angeles. And the high winds come occasionally that do this kind of destruction. We have them regularly, particularly in January and February, but the real destructive winds only come occasionally. Well, it just so happens when Hello Girls was on loan to Art Center in Pasadena, the winds came and literally blew each element over and cracked them, mangled them, wrecked them, every single one of them. So the object, the sculpture itself, then became nothing more than maquettes from which to make a new Calder, actually. So what happens is that the paddles were used to make outlines, the branches were straightened out, and new branches were made, and the pylons, which you can still see, they're the original pylons, but they're kind of bent slightly in an S shape. They were put into gigantic presses at a shipbuilding shop and pressed them back into shape. So that was the end of the loan at Art Center. So the space over here that was formerly occupied, that was the beginning. Then we came here. Now, in the meantime, when it went off to Art Center, this land here, this is a relatively contemporary view of LACMA looking down, so this is Wilshire Boulevard. A building called the Japanese Pavilion was put there, and you'll notice that all of the water, all this water, is all removed from LACMA. So there's no place quite yet to put it in the meantime. And this is the Japanese Pavilion. So this occupies the site first occupied by Hello Girls in here. Where are we? Here, Japanese Pavilion, that's where Hello Girls once was. This is where it came back to. And over this side, these are all of our tar pits. So the tar still to this day erupts around it. But getting rid of the water, we don't have any more tar to deal with. So, after it was repaired and brought back, this is the landscaping. Well, this is the lack of pond, I should say. And this is a pylon waiting for some place to go. And so, what happened to it was all of it was put in a bush, in the bushes and hills around. So here's 1, 2, 3. And because this was a wind and water feature, the Art Council members that paid for this were extremely unhappy with the situation. And someone wrote a scathing article in an art magazine that prompted the director of the time, Rusty Powell, to create in 1983 the Directors Roundtable Sculpture Garden in order to do something proper with Hello Girls. So he does. So Hello Girls is engineered. Actually, those of you who know Los Angeles, the news, Watts Towers, the guy who was one of the engineers that tested Watts Towers in its early preservation efforts, is the one who engineered the layout of Hello Girl, so when it spins in wind, high wind, the Santa Ana winds still come even though it's down. At LACMA, you still have the winds to contend with, so that when it spins, nothing interacts. And we created a new basin, so there's no tar seepage. However, the water filtration system is a drop-in unit that you literally climb down into, although it's buried in a hillside. But it was really meant for just a home pool. It just had 2 cardboard cartridges stacked that would filter the water. And you can imagine that that wasn't particularly efficient at taking care of the feature. But this is the feature as it was created in 1983. So here, that's the lid of a pump house, in fact. So this berm was created. You lift the lid and go in there, and this is the floor of Hello Girls, and it wraps around the Amundsen building. I'm sorry, the Bing building. And each one is spaced far apart, so there's no problems with Santa Ana winds. And this was the cover of one of the members' newsletters showing the feature in all of its full glory. And you can see the Japanese pavilion in the background, and this pool is sort of shaped from 12 o'clock, goes around to 9 o'clock, like that. Also, at this stage of the game, if we go back a little bit, vegetation. You can see that this tree is a little bit on the skimpy side, and they were planting. As time goes by, these plantings become a problem because the feature, as you see it right here, this big basin circulated 24,000 gallons of water. And as time goes by and the trees grow more, there's more and more leaf drop into it, sort of like the duck story. And it just would always overpower any filtration system that was operating. And so those who took care of the water sought to deal with algae and other things by shocking the pool on a regular basis to try and get rid of organic material. And that resulted in a pH of about 3.4. So the paddles were in a mess, the pylons were corroding, large organic volume of debris falling in, and the liner, that black liner, was starting to fail, and we were having some leakage issues. So, this is about where I entered the story, and I was given the task of trying to figure out what to do with this thing. So I talked to the County of Los Angeles to see if they would, their park and recs and pool people, if they would help us, and there was no help there. And it occurred to me that I had been to Vegas at one point, so I went back to Vegas to the Bellagio Hotel, which you know is surrounded by water. And I thought, well, if you guys can control this much water in a desert, and who's going to do it? And I thought, well, I'll just track down who's ever doing this, and I'll hire them to do this. So the company that engineered all the equipment for the Bellagio Hotel is a company called WET, and I contacted them. And very interested in the project, but what they said to me was that they engineer all the pumps and the filters and so on and so forth, but they don't install them. And I wanted whoever I was going to hire to work with me on the project to solve some of these problems, that not only were they going to design all the equipment for LACMA, but I could hire them to take care of the things that which they installed. Because a lot of people have the habit of making something that you pay a lot of money for, and then they walk away and you're left with a mess. Well, I have enough messes to deal with at LACMA. So, what I learned from WET was that they had 3 people who had worked for their company, and they had gone off and started a new company called WET Design. So I contracted them, and I walked the problem with them. And the first thing that we decided to do in terms of maintaining this water is to cut down the amount of water to be maintained from 24,000 gallons to 8,000 gallons. And the way we did that was by raising the floor. Okay? Then we constructed a new pump house to handle the water maintenance issues. And you'll see the pump house in a minute. And we cut back the trees a lot to decrease the foliage dump. But the pump house has a basket strainer about this big that the water goes into before it even gets to the sand pump. So you literally dump out all these leaves all the time. And as far as our feature is concerned, you know, we wanted to hire Wet to take care of it. And if you take, we actually worked it out. Blackman, of course, didn't want to pay as many days as we wanted, but it takes a minimum of 3 days, 3 maintenance days to maintain this feature. If you go down to 2, it's not enough. All the slime comes back, everything comes back. 3 days is what it takes to maintain Hello Girls.
For what period of time?
All year round.
Oh, for you.
All year round. And our past administration, after we had done this, we had a past administration that was trying to save a lot of money because LACMA was in not very good financial straits, and of course this was a big chunk of change that they were hoping to take away. And this is something where, oh, do we really need this feature? Can we shut it off? Because somebody talked in there about shutting off features and so on and so forth. When this feature is going properly, all is well. When the feature is not going properly, the complaints to the director's office are immediate. It's something that the public likes a lot. Okay.
So you say it takes 3 days every year?
3 days a week.
3 days a week?
Yeah, per year. If you're budgeting for the year, 3 days a week. 3 days a week. Sorry. No, not 3 days a week for a whole year. No. Wednesday, Friday. Okay? So this is, let's go back a minute. No, not that way.
Is this one guy 3 days a week, or 2 guys?
I did it myself, so yeah, you just need somebody that goes out and sweeps the floor and empties the filters, backwashes, dumps the chemistry. It's basically about a 4-hour job to do all of that. Yeah, 3 days a week. Yeah. Okay, so here's the floor, right? This is the floor. So I raise this. Okay? So when we raise the floor, all the plumbing now is hidden in here. It used to be below this. So the floor has been raised, the pump house is here. At this point and back over here are very large intake drains. And this floor is tiled. So the idea is that when the feature is working, which you'll see, water comes over here, and literally anything that's light enough for the water to push, it's called a water skin effect, literally pushes out into the drain, and then it sucks over and down into the drain. And you can literally see from the 2 or 3 o'clock position, it'll suck into the 2 drains, and from the center of the watch dial, it'll suck into. It's very, very powerful filtration device. And this is the pump house. So you lift these 2 stainless steel doors. There's a definite flaw in this concrete because the concrete doesn't, this hinge system puts a little too much stress on the concrete, so there are cracks developing there. But what can I say? In the old pump house, there was 1 pump for everything. Here we have one very large pump that sucks in the water for circulation, and then there's a much smaller pump here that only shoots the jets that hits the paddles. So we've divided up the responsibility of how the water gets taken care of, and this is a sand filter here for backwashing. So we thought it was a wonderful solution to put this pump house into the ground. It's surrounded by nice foliage and so on and so forth. However, the downside of it is that it is possible to flood, despite the fact that it has, in this corner, there's actually a reservoir with a sump pump in it. these pipes, if something happens to these pipes and they get a crack, a large enough crack, you can flood it. So if I had to do this project over again, I would bury it into that hillside right nearby where the other one was, so I wouldn't have that particular problem. It's the idea that you don't want to see it. That's the idea, and you're trying to take advantage of it. But if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't bury it. The Santa Ana ones have another side effect, and that is these are the links that hold these branches in paddles. And you know, they're not light, even though we went from in the damaged parts at Art Center, when they were all these painted stainless steel things. The paddles today are painted aluminum. We changed it from stainless steel to aluminum so that they were lighter. But these links have worn over the years, and the last big Santa Ana we had literally wore through some of these things. And security called me and said, "Oh, the paddles are in the water." And I said, I couldn't imagine what he was talking about, but that's where right through from the 1980s all the way through. So, and those were re-welded, rebuilt, and put back in position. Let's see if this works. Jason, this is a video.
Do you have the original video also?
It's right in there. It's embedded in the PowerPoint. Can we go back to a...
It's missing its video.